Hey guys, welcome to the LUMUN Model UN training platform. My name is Shahmir and I'll be delivering today's lecture on opening speeches. Two important disclaimers and two things to note before we dive straight into the content. The first thing to note here is that the kind of information I'm going to be talking about in this video and who this video is useful for, what kind of speeches this video is useful for, is essentially the first speech that you will be giving in a Model UN conference before the floor is open for moderated or unmoderated caucuses. So some circuits and some conferences will explicitly tag this as opening speeches, but this video is also equally relevant and equally useful for general speakers list speeches that you will be giving on day one of a committee before the floor is open for moderated or unmoderated caucuses. Second important disclaimer before we get into the content is that everything I say in this video are things stemming from my personal experiences, are things that have worked for me in particular at local and international conferences. Always remember that there is no one size fits all in any Model UN, in any element of Model UN. There is no one perfect formula to ace any particular element of Model UN. Same is the case with opening speeches, but I'm in this lecture, I'm going to try and talk about generally things that are generally considered to be good practices, things that help you increase your impact in the committee, and things that help you stand out. So I hope that there is something to be learned from this video, and I hope that potentially you can end this lecture by learning something that you perhaps did not know of earlier. So let's dive straight into the content. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is the importance of opening speeches and why you should care and why you should watch this video in its entirety. So in terms of importance of opening speeches, I think it is fairly intuitive to say that opening speeches are the first impression that you have on the committee director, on the people who are going to be adjudicating and evaluating your performance eventually for the awards, but also on your fellow delegates who you are eventually going to be working with in the coming 3 or 4 days, however long the Model UN you're attending is. This is absolutely crucial because always remember that Model UN is entirely dependent on memorability and impact. That is to say that in Model UN, no delegate, no committee director, no member of the dais is going to be tracking down each word that you say. And it's largely going to be dependent on how you deliver what you say, how you utilize the speaking opportunities that you get, and how memorable, how impactful you are, and to what extent you can stand out from the crowd. That is what matters in a Model UN. And if your end goal is to win an award, that is what you should care about. In terms of opening speeches, I think in memorability and impact, this is the ideal platform to achieve this memorability and impact. Opening speeches are speeches that each delegate is going to be getting, are speeches that you're going to be giving right at the beginning of the conference, are speeches that you're going to be giving at a very strategically well-positioned point of view to build a narrative to just stand out from the crowd. So we're going to be talking throughout the course of this video about some general practices to have that help you stand out and that help you increase memorability and impact. Second thing to note here, and that is an extension of the first point, is that opening speeches become incredibly important and even more so than they are usually in incredibly large or highly competitive committees. This is important because if you're in a highly competitive or incredibly large committee, chances are that your speaking opportunities are going to be very limited. So if you do get an opportunity in your opening speech or in the general speakers list speech on day one, you have to capitalize on that opportunity. You cannot let it go because speaking opportunities will be limited anyways. Thirdly, in terms of the strategic importance of opening speeches, I think that they are the best platform to help you build a narrative and this narrative helps you in your unmoderated caucuses. It helps you build an effective unmoderated caucus strategy, something I'm going to be talking about later along in this video. All right, so what should an opening speech entail essentially? I think that there are three crucial elements that an opening speech should essentially entail to varying degrees of importance, and you can spend varying degrees of time explaining each of these, but I think all three of them are important to have in any opening speech. The first thing that is important is rhetorical appeal, and what I like to call as a hook, that is an attention grabber. I like to divide this in terms of opening and closing rhetoric. Opening rhetoric being the first thing you're going to be saying in your speech, and closing rhetoric being the last thing you're going to be saying in your speech. More about rhetoric in the next slide. Second thing to note here is that in terms of substantive content, the best kind of content is content that is precise, that is persuasive, that is strategically relevant, and that helps you build a narrative. All four of these elements are crucial in terms of your substantive content to be effective in the context of an opening speech. I'm going to dive deeper into all of these elements later on in this lecture. Third thing that is important in an opening speech, and something that most delegates miss out on, is engagement. Engagement meaning that you have to engage and recognize, you have to engage with and recognize the contributions of all those who have spoken before you and all those who are going to speak after you. This is very crucial, and I'm going to develop more on this later. Additionally, in terms of delivering an opening speech, also two things we're going to be talking about in this video is number one, body language, the kind of posture you have, how approachable you are, etc. And number two, kind of rhetorical devices and speech devices that we use to increase impact and persuasiveness in terms, for example, strategic pauses, voice variations, tone variations, the kind of pace we use, etc. All of the things I'm going to talk about later on in the video. So let's get straight into the first element an opening speech should essentially have, that is rhetoric. As I said earlier, I like to think of this as being divided as opening and closing rhetoric. Both are absolutely crucial in enhancing your impact and memorability. Opening rhetoric being the first thing that you say in the committee, essentially to act as an attention grabber, and closing rhetoric being the last thing that you say in your opening speech, which essentially is a strong statement that helps your speech linger on in the minds of the delegates and in the minds of the days far after you've sat down. Second thing I like to note here is that the strongest rhetoric is one that ties in with your content. This is absolutely crucial because a lot of the rhetoric that we see being thrown around in many Model UN circuits is just like absolutely random words being tied together, or very, very random statements being thrown around that probably do not have much relevance to what your speech actually entails. I think that the most effective and the most memorable rhetoric is the one that ties in with your content. Third thing to note is that rhetoric is effective only if delivered in the correct manner. The correct manner being the correct utilization of the strategic tools we talked about earlier in the previous slide with regards to body language and with regards to voice variation, tone variation, pace variation, etc. So I've written down some examples of what rhetoric I'm talking about. This is I hope this helps you conceptualize exactly what we're talking about in terms of rhetoric, particularly in the context of opening speeches. I think all of these are wonderful pieces of rhetoric that tie in with the content, that help you streamline the rhetorical persuasiveness of the attention grabber and the hook to the actual substantive content that you're going to be delivering, and the end product comes out to be a very, very effective, very, very persuasive speech. So let's move on to the most important part of this lecture and the most important part of an opening speech, that is the substantive content. I think there are 5 things to note in terms of substantive content. All 5 of these have to be present in terms of any substantive content that you deliver in an opening speech to varying degrees of importance. Number 1 is that you need to outline the issue. Outlining the issue basically means just telling the committee what exactly the issue is. And I think here is where the previous slide of tying in your rhetoric with your content becomes extremely relevant. If I just go back here and we see the example, for example, the first thing that I've written in terms of examples, the supreme act of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Now, if my entire speech is focused around talking about why military interventions are bad and why it is likely to why diplomatic intervention is likely to get better consequences than a military intervention, then this piece of rhetoric is perfect in terms of it allows me to streamline exactly what I'm saying, and it allows me to tie in my persuasive, strong punchline with my actual content. So I think that outlining the issue is extremely crucial, and rhetorical appeal there is incredibly important. And I think everyone will have a fair understanding of what the issue is. If you've read the study guide, if you've done some external research, you can easily understand what the issue is. A good way to think about this is by dividing it in terms of stakeholders, what people are affected, what groups of people are affected, how are they affected, or even in dividing it in terms of broad issues, for example, economic issues, political issues, social issues, humanitarian issues, etc. One important thing to note here, and this is by far the most common mistake delegates tend to make, is that they repeat a lot of what the issue is. So if you're if you're the 21st person delivering an opening speech and 20 people before you have delivered an opening speech, chances are that they've probably nailed down very well what the issue exactly is. So if there's not much to say here, then don't say much here. It is always better not to say a particular thing, not to outline the issue as well as you might have if all other delegates before you have done that very well. But if you can find something that they've missed, if you can find a stakeholder that they've missed, if you can find an avenue that they've missed, do definitely talk about that. Second important element of in terms of content is clarifying your stance. Again, this varies in terms of how much time you're going to be spending on this, in terms of how much importance you're going to give to this. This varies according to the committee you're in and the country you're representing. If your country or your personality is absolutely crucial to your topic, and it's absolutely central to your topic, then I strongly advise spending a large chunk of your speech in clarifying your stance, in telling the committee exactly what it is that your policy objectives are in the particular subtopics within the larger topic. Third thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing of any opening speech is the proposing of solutions, and particularly solutions that are plausible and unique. What I mean by plausibility is that solutions that are well researched, that are robust, that are well mechanized, that are achievable, and that make sense to the delegates that, okay, this makes sense, this is an interesting idea, and this is something that we can reasonably achieve within the mandate of the committee that you're in. Second and more important thing here with regards to proposing solutions is uniqueness. Uniqueness of solutions is absolutely crucial because your opening speech is the platform that you're going to be using to stand out. And a crucial element of standing out is proposing a unique solution that no one else has proposed before you. And it is something that now the dais and other delegates can attach with you. They can attach your face to that solution for the duration of the conference. Whenever that particular solution comes up, for example, XYZ framework, whenever that XYZ framework comes up in the 3, 4, 5 days of debate, they know that, okay, this is the framework that this delegate proposed. This is the face that we attach to this framework. This is absolutely crucial because when that framework is eventually and hopefully added to the draft resolution that is eventually then that goes on to pass, then that is a good sign, and that is a very good sign on your skill as a diplomat, on your skill as someone who was able to push their narrative in the committee and was able to successfully do that and was able to successfully stand out. Fourth thing to note here, and this is also something that a lot of delegates do miss out on, is providing direction to the committee. This is an incredibly effective way to sort of utilize your speech in the best possible manner. That is, if people have outlined the issue very well, if people have clarified stances very well, if you're not very relevant to the committee, perhaps what you can utilize your opening speech to do is to provide direction to the committee, is to tell them exactly what the breakdown of the topic is and what we should be discussing in the future. This is very useful if you're one of the last speakers delivering an opening speech. So for example, if you're the last speaker recognized to give an opening speech, and after that, the floor is going to be open for moderated and unmoderated caucuses, it is incredibly strategically useful for you to utilize your time in providing direction to the committee, in telling them that this is what we should be focusing on. This is the most important thing in the topic. This is how we should break down this topic. And this is how we should approach certain issues within this topic. Fifth thing, and also an incredibly important thing, is strategic awareness and engagement. I've already touched a bit upon this, but I want to delve deeper into what I mean by strategic awareness. And I think this is, by and large, the most common mistake people make with regards to opening speeches and with regards to Model UN in general. That is that they're lacking in terms of strategic awareness. Strategic awareness in the context of opening speeches simply means that you are aware of what has been said before you, and you are aware of what has been established in the committee. This looks like you not repeating what other people have said, but and you also engaging in a very effective and substantive manner with what other people have said. Not just recognizing and listing down that USA, Brazil, Russia, etc., said this, but just actually engaging with the kind of content that they're giving, and actually noting down each unique thing each delegate has pointed out, either complimenting that, or either respectfully pointing out a certain issue you feel that there is with that, or resolving a clash in the committee, or providing a unique solution in the committee. Strategic awareness largely depends on awareness regarding your positionality within opening speeches. If you're the 21st delegate and 20 delegates before you have given opening speeches, then you need to be listening. You need to be listening very, very closely, very, very actively, and need to be strategically aware of what you go on to say. So I think these 5 things are incredibly important in terms of content. In terms of body language, pace, and tone, I think there are certain things that are useful in all Model UN speeches that you're going to be giving, and particularly useful in opening speeches, because these are the speeches where you want to maximize the impact and memorability that you have. So I think there are 5 things that are crucial here. Firstly is that you have to speak slowly and clearly. A fast-paced speech loses out on impact significantly, which is why speaking fast, as you might do in parliamentary debating or declamation, is something that you need to avoid at all costs in Model UN. Second thing to note here is that voice variations are critical, particularly when delivering rhetoric within opening speeches or an important solution and policy. So raising your voice or lowering your voice in terms of how important the content you're delivering, in terms of what you want to achieve with regards to persuasiveness, with regards to impact, is very, very crucial. So slowing down at certain stages and picking up pace and picking up the voice at certain stages is very important. Thirdly, your body language must be confident, calm, and diplomatic. So what I mean by this is just very, very simply just standing upright, being confident, being like calm, staying in one place and staying very still, and just staying very natural. Fourthly is that your hand movements must be controlled yet natural. So this looks like when we tend to speak, our hands tend to go like everywhere. It's like an automatic subconscious reaction. What you need to be careful of is that your hand movements need to be controlled, and your hand movements, they need to be controlled to a certain extent, but they also need to be natural, and they also need to look like that you are in control of where your hands are going. Fifth, your facial expressions must be warm and welcoming, and as approachability is crucial in Model UN, as we've established earlier. Again, a very subconscious reaction a lot of people have is that when they're speaking, their facial expressions tend to be extremely serious, extremely stern. Particularly when you're speaking about a very serious topic, your facial expressions will most likely be very, very stern, very, 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 very scary. This is something that you need to avoid, and you generally try and just have a very laid back, very natural facial expression that looks like you are someone who is approachable, because this is absolutely crucial in getting people to work with you in unmoderated caucuses. So usually having a smile on your face, not like an absurd smile, particularly if you're talking about a serious issue, but just having a naturally pleasant sort of facial expressions, and making sure that you're consciously making an effort not to look stern, not to look very scary or frightening. In terms of preparation, lastly, this is the part where a lot of delegates are confused about as to what is the best way to approach preparation. I think that the question that you need to answer, and the question I'll be answering here, is that should you pre-write and memorize your opening speech? The answer to this is tricky. So I think that firstly, there needs to be some degree of pre-writing and some degree of memorization that necessarily needs to happen, particularly if you're in a highly competitive, incredibly large committee, or if you're attending an incredibly important conference. It is important that you pre-write your speech. It is important that you memorize your speech to a certain extent. It is important that you're very, very comfortable with delivering your opening speech before you actually step into the room. But notice that I've talked a lot about strategic awareness, about your positionality, about not repeating things. So it is absolutely crucial that whatever you write down, whatever you memorize, is not the be it and all. Remember that always it's important to have the skill of impromptu thinking. It is important to have the skill of thinking and speaking on the spot in a Model UN conference. So if you've pre-written a speech, if you've memorized the speech, but delegates before you have said the same thing, you need to be well researched enough to come up with newer solutions, newer issues on the spot that you can include in your opening speech, and then you can then deliver effectively. There are certain things that you should definitely have memorized, you should definitely have perfected, such as your opening rhetoric, such as your closing rhetoric, and you should also have backups of these in case that rhetoric is taken by another delegate. So if repeating that rhetoric will just lose out on the impact that it has, and it will serve no purpose. How to go about practicing an opening speech, I think these are largely dependent on what kind of person you are. I think what worked for me is just like practicing it repeatedly in front of a mirror, noticing my hand movements, noticing my facial expressions, noticing my body language, and just going over the motion again and again and again until I've absolutely perfected it. And also, it's always useful to get critique from your seniors, from people who are more experienced than you, who can tell you some of the nitty-gritties that you might be getting wrong. Lastly, the importance of research. We've uploaded another video on research, by the way, on the same channel. And research is, as it is in Model UN, it is crucial for all elements of Model UN, and opening speeches are no different. As I've talked about strategic awareness, as I've talked about knowing your positionality within within the opening speeches, and knowing that and like coming up with unique content, coming up with content that allows you to stand out. I think that research is the tool that is going to get you and going to allow you to stand out, and it's going to allow you to think impromptu and to think on the spot and to deliver the best content in the most effective manner. That is all from this lecture. Thank you so much for watching if you made it thus far. As always, feel free to ask any questions in the comments below. Remember that there is no wrong question. All questions are perfectly valid in their own right. Whether you're an experienced delegate, whether you're a newbie, we're more than welcome to answer any questions that you have. With regards to opening speeches or with regards to any other elements of Model UN. Also comment down what topics you want us to discuss next. And please do not forget to subscribe and share with your friends who might find this information useful on our LUMUN Model UN training platform. With that, I'm signing out, and I hope that this lecture was useful for you. Bye-bye.